Hello. So the review you're about to see is for the APS Dragonfly, and I wanted to preface the review because basically I found some defects in the gun at the time that basically I got it home and opened it up for the review. I reached out to APS and haven't really heard anything substantial back about it, so the review as it is stands. I don't want you to shy away from the product, but I do think that you should certainly take a look at the inside of your gun before you pull the trigger on laying cash down. It is, at least in Canada, marginally expensive compared to some other options, so do your research and check the gun out before you leave. And without further ado, here is the review for the APS Dragonfly. Hey folks, welcome to the Basement of Doom. Today we are going to be doing a review on the APS Concept Dragonfly. I'll be reviewing all of these guys later. But for now, we're going to be concentrating on what this interesting entry-level pistol brings to the table in terms of ergonomics, build quality, and a few other things. So come along and we'll kind of see what we do. Okay, so this is the Dragonfly by APS. It is what I would call kind of an entry-level, but very well-appointed handgun. At least on the exterior, and we're just going to go through a few features, kind of give you a general overview of what I think of it. I haven't had the chance to game it yet, and we'll get into that too. Yeah, first thing you notice is kind of this very wonderfully textured grip, and I did hold the KSC and a WE, and without sort of purchasing a custom lower, there was no way to really get this without getting grip tape and kind of doing it yourself, or getting a soldering iron and making little pointy things. But this grip, essentially it grabs. Like basically it'll hold a microfiber cloth, and you can certainly hold it in your hands if you're running through the woods or doing CQB, and I do like that. Hopefully you can hear me over the furnace. Bad timing furnace. Let me turn that off. Okay, getting back to it. So the stippled portions of the grip and sort of lower are in interesting places here, obviously along here, and on the kind of the finger rest area. Now I would guess that APS at some point got sued by Glock, and they sort of killed two birds with one stone and eliminated anything that could possibly be trademarked. You know, basically all the logos and stuff like that, and decided to give you a good grip. That's just my take on it anyway. Overall, the slide is actually really quite nice. I had to do a little bit of adjustment. It does have a bit of wobble, and you can see daylight through. So it's not exactly a totally tight fit, not like some of the other ones that I've held, but I would honestly say, you know, it's good for the money. In American dollars, I think you're paying $140 at the distributor for this, and for, you know, an entry-level, good-looking pistol, not bad. Also, what differs from the other Glocks is the trigger safety. Not there. And we do not have what you would have on the WEs and a couple other brands where you have the additional sliding safety. So the safety that you get is just built into the back of the trigger. Basically, pretty simple stuff. It just sort of wedges against the lower. And I think that could eventually cause issues unless you're very careful to always disengage the safety before pulling the trigger really hard, because you could probably throw this trigger off of alignment just by sort of throwing that force at it. How is the slide action? Well, honestly, not bad. Now I've worked it in for a few days, but when it's not cocking, it's very smooth. You do have to apply a bit of force just to kind of throw the hammer, and it's fairly abrupt, but you know, once again, $130 pistol. This is interesting because the sales literature for the Dragonfly indicates that it is a dual fuel gun. That means you can get a CO2 mag. You can also get a what they call a top gas mag, and which will probably run green or HCFC 134. The CO mag is interesting, and I'll show you this just for the sake of curiosity. It's a two-process sort of deal when you don't accidentally fuse the two bits together to load it up with CO. So, get this. Bottom load. Okay, so here's how it works. Basically, this magazine This entire chamber here, I don't know if you can see that, basically holds the entire CO. One thing to note, it is not rounded at the bottom, which I found interesting, unlike what you would see at, let's say, in a 177 or something like that. But we'll let that be as a design concern. So, drop in your CO, then you insert this big brass plug, and then you tighten it with the outer portion of this key, which, at least in the literature, is supposed to work, but my model seized the inner and the outer almost immediately out of the box, so all you really have to do is tighten it down like this. Now what they want you to do is tighten down the outer to seal the chamber, because there's an O-ring around the brass, which they give you a replacement of, which should speak to its longevity. And then you tighten the inner, and it releases CO into the entire mag. Now it's interesting because it does feed liquid CO, I would assume, out the bottom, as opposed to kind of doing just vapor from the top like you would with some other units. Magazine quality, I have to reserve some judgment on that, because what I was finding was, even though this is I believe a double stack, I was getting BB jams right about here, and during firing consistently, and maybe it's just because it's new, the Dragonfly would basically stop and lock the slide. I'd drop the magazine and I'd have about 4 or 5 BBs left in it. So that's kind of food for thought. Whether or not it's wearing in, don't know, can't say, but yeah, that's kind of something to keep in mind if you do purchase this. Because I'm more of a green gas guy or a propane guy, I am probably going to put this on a shelf and never use it again. The sales literature tells us that we can use a TM Glock magazine, but here's what happens when you use at least the one that I bought. Done. So as you can see, it's kind of hit or miss on using other manufacturers' magazines in this gun, but APS does sell online green gas versions of its magazine. So I ended up ordering a few of those. American, they're $22 a piece, so they're pretty cheap. Because I'm in Canada, I had to pay the exchange rate and $35 of shipping. So for 3 mags, it was about, I think it came to about $140. So a fair bit, but less than you would pay at your local hobby shop, possibly. Now, because I am out of CO tonight, I will not be able to give you firing, but I will do you one better. I will not fire it, because you can look up firing videos. Let's go ahead and strip it down. So here's the inside of the lower frame. Pretty basic bitch stuff, pardon my language. Essentially nothing really too solid. We've got a little bit of woggle on this guy, and maybe that's for tolerance, I don't know. But suffice to say, I mean, it seems like very basic internals. There's one screw in the front, which I had to actually tighten right out of the box, and there's one back here which was tight. So yeah, I could see these internals, at least in the lower, lasting as long as you're not beating the shit out of the gun or misaligning it. One thing to note though, and I just noticed this now, the magazine release, which you can probably see down there, is not necessarily very well machined. And for cosmetics, even just running 1 or 2 mags through it, you're noting that you're already starting to lose paint. So there's a bit of a fitment issue there, even on their magazines, but it's only worse on the others. And you may get that on other manufacturers. Okay, so let's break this down now. Pretty basic bitch spring. Nothing really to write home about that. This is a plastic retainer And one thing I did note is that the fitment in the end of the slide, kind of questionable. It actually doesn't sit to any of these grooves. It just kind of woggles around on the edge. So consider that. Basically, if you're really playing hard, you may end up misaligning it, and you may have it kind of let go in an awkward angle and fuck something else up. Pardon my language. The slide itself is aluminum and actually quite rather nice, minus the earlier kind of daylight issues that I noted. But again, this is an economy pistol that looks good, so you're going to take a couple hits on quality. Let's go ahead and get you out. So, clear plastic nozzle. I think that's what it's called. I'm showing my lack of airsoft ability here. Pretty basic. I imagine, looking at the inside of this, that there would be some upgrades that you could do very easily. Of note, versus the KW, can't remember what brand it was, never mind. They didn't throw anything in the box for adding a cocking handle or basically anything to mount sort of a red dot. The WE, that's what it was, did include those in the box. Okay, time for the hop. So, either due to manufacturing or my own ineptitude, I can't seem to get this out. I may have to disassemble it. But one thing I wanted to note, and hopefully this will focus, is the, I would say, fairly questionable machining and fitment on the hop-up unit. Now you can see there, perhaps in better relief here, there's kind of a spot where the two halves join, where they're actually sort of height differentiated, and it doesn't look like it was machined in there on purpose. Also, if you take a look at the sort of the chamber this away, you'll notice a very thin spot, which I'll actually point out with a screw right here. And it's worth noting that out of the box, that it's thin enough that I actually just managed to kind of take a chunk out of it. Come on. There was actually kind of a little bit of daylight poking through. If you can focus, I won't throw you away. There we go. So you might be able to see that right now. Maybe if I just throw on the light. So that's kind of the quality of the internals. The hop unit itself, oh yeah, look at that. Right at the back too, you've got this sort of split here, which doesn't carry through to the inner chamber, but I think it's also worth noting just from an overall quality perspective that exists. If you take a look at one in the shop, make sure you do pop it open or have them pop it open to sort of inspect this stuff. The outer barrel, pretty basic. There was a little bit of a fitment issue with the slide. As you can see, as the slide is kind of barked back along, it's kind of started to sand down the corner. I've owned this gun for less than 24 hours, so I mean, basically, I can't speak to long-term use. One positive, you can get a silencer adapter and run a longer barrel. So, that is essentially the inner tour of the APS Dragonfly. My final verdict on it will come when I get the chance to game this soon, I hope. But I guess we'll kind of have to see whenever that happens, if my magazines show up or if it doesn't fall apart or become useless in the meantime. But yeah, so that is the APS Dragonfly. APS, if you're listening, I would absolutely love to speak to you about whether or not all of your dragonflies are sort of leaving the nest and not shooting straight based on the quality that I see inside this one. Of course, it should also be said, Dragonfly has produced an absolutely beautiful lower and an aesthetically pleasing pistol for what could possibly be light field use or just kind of plinking around the house at a decent cost. This is not a Marui. If I bring over my 2011, you can sort of tell the difference almost immediately between the two. There's a little bit of slide wobble, but the internals are rock solid. I've put thousands of rounds through this guy without an issue, without any hang-ups, without a jam, nothing. And out of the box, this one definitely had some issues to be worked on. Does sound pretty cool though. Anyway, so that is kind of the off-the-cuff review and internals on the APS Dragonfly. I've said that like 7 times. If you enjoyed the review, please feel free to rank it, or you know, just kind of move on with your day. And APS, if you're listening, I would absolutely love a hop-up that doesn't look like Swiss cheese. Have a nice day.